see my family and something as I sit at a drink. And I'm sitting in the living room, and Sumaya, my wife, she walked in. So I had to sit for 3 hours trying to carve a tree that would protect the 5-star hotels in flight, but help me have an ease of conscience. Sit down there. So I'm sitting there, and Sumaya walked in. Sumaya, may Allah bless. May Allah bless. May Allah bless my parents who instilled this in me, and may Allah bless Sumaya that He sent her into my life to reinforce what my parents said to me. I always say, surround yourself with people who are bitter in your ear. Because they love to keep, you know the ones who are like, my baby, like, you didn't tell the story properly. Or my mother who felt concerned. Like, I remember once, somebody said, Sammy, let's fly business class. And my mom would be like, Ummat la ilaha illallah travel economy. Hey, don't get carried away with luxury lifestyle. So Sumaya walks in. So Sumaya is an expert, halal travel guide and stuff like that. She's not into politics too much, but she walks in and you say, Sammy, it's almost nothing. You promised to take the kids out, and you haven't. What on earth are you doing on your phone that you would neglect your kids and you don't take them to the park? Obviously, they will stop the contact. You know, like it will become known. Sammy is a double-edged sword, etc. Maybe I have to be more impacted if I keep quiet and have that action. Maybe I had more impact if I maybe you should almost say to me, you said it. In any case, maybe if I maintain that access, I will be able to convince that person later. Sumaya wasn't having any of that. Sumaya said, if another Arab leader that you regularly criticize did it, would you have to or not? I said, I do. There's your answer. I take the picture back. And sure enough, the next day, no really. And it was later, if you talk to some part of history, okay, and Sammy, he don't care to things, but he's a double-edged sword, like, he doesn't know what loyalty means. I always say their loyalty, I'm loyal to Haqq and loyal to Batil.
Some people's loyalty is not to that.
It's not, exactly. And to be honest, for me, when it happened, I remember, and like, it's like, I'll give this anecdote before saying this, so I don't condemn myself. I was in Berkeley, San Francisco, and somebody said to me, Sammy, what's the hardest part of the boycott? And I said, no, he said, how are you finding the boycott? I said, I'm finding it hard. He said, astaghfirullah, how can you find the boycott hard? I said, no, the boycotting is easy, the finding alternatives is hard. I said, I wanted to buy Timberlands, but they said, I said, no, I can't find the Muslim equivalent of Timberlands, like these things, etc. Like, and then one guy said to me, subhanallah, you are showing this face to, boycott hard because of Timberlands. I said, easy, brother. The Prophet Muhammad left Mecca on the promise of Allah, but still said, I'm heartbroken, and Allah, I would not have left you. He said, how can you bring seerah for Timberlands? I said, because for you, seerah only applies to certain things. For me, my beloved Prophet applies in big and small. That's the difference. So I remember sitting on the sofa. I was like, by this time, of course, it spread, Sammy, was, giving advice to this government, and look how he, and also this government during this communication strategy, I was already intending on leaving because, that's the story, I want to go. But anyway, so I remember sitting there, like with Sumaya, and things sort of took a bit of a turn. I was still comfortable, alhamdulillah, but not, in the way it's like, sometimes you sit there and you're like, was it the right thing, was it this, should I be smart, or should I do whatever? But I don't know, maybe you might have some of these stories and maybe the other people here who will have similar stories. When a door is shut in your face, you feel that isolation. Allah opens doors from where you don't expect it. And I remember asking, I said, what's the best advice you give for a career? Or like, what do you regret if you have to look back? I said, I don't regret anything that happened. I don't regret the way the career path went. And inshallah, I won't regret where it goes. What I regret is those transitional phases where you feel isolated. Those transitional phases where you feel it's not going your way. Those transitional phases where it's not going the way you want it. I wish in those moments I'd been more grateful for what I had, as opposed to saying, Allahumma wa ni'mal. I wish in those moments I understood what into ni'matallahi la tuhsuha, it's not a blessing from Allah. I wish in those moments I could say that Allahumma, I know I'm isolated at the moment, I know things are not going my way in the way that I want them to, but I'm content, Ya Rabbi. That is the true test of character, not what you say when the door's open. And that's why it's funny. There was a particular client who finally came knocking on my door, and when they came in there, Sumaya said, why are you not so happy about it? I thought, subhanAllah, this was always written for me. This was always written for me. This was always written, and I was impatient. This was always written, and I was saying, when is it coming? Allah had written it in the... You know, Sumaya, I said to her, if it had come to me earlier, I wouldn't have the knowledge required to fulfill my obligation. If it had come, I wasn't ready, Sumaya, at that time. I was desperate for it, but it's like I realized Allah was saying, Sammy, I want it when it comes, but you maximize it. You're not ready yet. I need to show you first, Bosnia. I need to meet Imam Tom and Sheikh Omar Suleiman. I need to see what America looks like. I need to meet all these people first. I needed to go through these processes first. I needed so that when they come, you know, and you are ready to be the vehicle for this struggle when this genocide comes, because you're able to reflect on what came before. I wish I had in those moments the fortitude and wisdom to say, Allahumma, I know you've written something. I don't know what it is, but I know you've written it. And so I'm happy, Jamie, having the copy with Imam Sam, discussing, see, I didn't say copy, right? Imam Sam, plotting or planning the next step to move forward, because we're convinced we may not succeed in the plan, but we may as well move, because if we move, Allah will come 10 steps. Allah will come running. As long as we move in His name, even if this plan doesn't work, Allah will guide it. The hockey stick that He said, Allah will guide it in a way in which it comes. And that's the thing, it's about perspective. I know that some people might say, how do they start with Gaza and get there? If that's how you feel, it's because it's a shell of interpretation where you don't see how that applies to Gaza. Gaza, to stand up for Gaza, is perspective. It's the belief, if I stand for what's right, Allah will make it change. If I raise my voice, Candace Owens will get. If I raise my voice, Tucker Carlson will get. If I raise my voice, Ta-Nehisi Coates will get. If I raise my voice, companies will start leaving the Zionist apartheid occupation and movies will start downgrading. If I boycott, McDonald's will end up shutting stores, because I didn't believe I had power, but the McDonald's CEO believes I do, which is why he's shutting those doors. But it's all about, if you move, if you have the perspective that move and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will amplify that. So if you have that understanding that Allah is always there, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never left you, that in Surah Taha, when Musa alayhi salam makes the dua asking Allah, Allah says, وَلَقَدْ مَنَنَّ عَلَيْكَ مَرَّةً أُخْرَى Musa, we've given you what you asked. قال قد أوتيت سؤلك يا موسى ولقد مننا عليك مرة أخرى. And Musa, this is not the first time we've shown you favor. Implying, Ya Musa, do not ask me as if I've never given you. Do not ask me as if I never looked after you. Do not ask me as if I have ceased giving you at any moment in time, because let me remind you what saved you as a baby was I bestowed my favor when you could not even ask for a favor. I saved you when you could not even ask to save me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying, I am always blessing this ummah. I am always giving you capabilities. I'm always giving you talents. If only you would appreciate that نحن أقرب إليك من حبل الوريد, that I am there with you now. So move and leave the rest to me. Believe in Allah. Believe in the promise of Jannah, and you will find that Macron calls for an arms embargo, and Netanyahu starts panicking, and the ICJ rules that Israel must be tried for genocide, and the ICC begins the process for arrest warrant, and Israel goes from being a haven of genocide victims to a haven of genocide. Be Israel now because you move.
Allah. I mean, committed to the truth and ready to sacrifice. I mean, I think that's so important. You know what I'm teaching something ago? You know what I was 10 years ago? You got an idea? Wow, no idea. I was electrical farmer. Yeah. So I was working, I was on farm, working with my hands. And, you know...
How does that go? You know you're saying, how do you go from Gaza to Iraq? How do you go from Gaza to Iraq?
From a convert's perspective, it's just like, every time I've sacrificed something for Allah, Allah has elevated higher. And it's like you don't even, like it's a theory until you live it.
Yeah.
You know, and once you live it, it's almost like, you know how some of the petting states that if you had seen a companion, and if the companion could feed you, they would have said you don't feed you. You know, there comes a point, and I'm not saying that I've reached it or anything, but I can get it, right? Theoretically, that the more you sacrifice, the more you see Allah just elevate and elevate. And you're presented with these moments of moral clarity. Like one of my kids said, he said, the devil, they can't always give you a muscle. That's how the delusion works. Why I'm acting. Oh, I have my relationship. I've been working so hard with this party or that party on the inside, massaging this, I got this, you know, thing, and now and you tell yourself you see progress. But in reality, you sold it all. You sold your dignity, you sold your people, you sold your dreams. and you're not getting anything that's going to move the needle.
And there's a story, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that. It shows you that wisdom can be given regardless of it. One of the hardest things about traveling is that while my wife Sumaya says, go to Allah, I spend my whole day to my leg weeping, crying. But I once told her, wife, she said the world to my dad more than I do. Which really breaks my heart, like really. So one thing that, you know, I started doing every night when you call her, and I said, I sent her every one of the stories. She loves it. So the other day she's telling me, and I don't know if it was, as if Allah had written it for that moment when I needed to hear it. I said, Baba, I was reading to the Baba, you have to listen to the story. A man realized that there's a village, they were worshipping the tree. So the man was really upset, so he said, I want to show them the power of Allah. I want to remove this tree so that... So he went, and then Shaitan came in front of him. Shaitan said, why do you want to cut the tree? He said, because I want them to remember that Allah is supreme. So Shaitan wrestled with him, and he beat Shaitan. But just before he was about to chop the tree, brother, Shaitan said, wait, don't chop the tree, and I promise to put a dirham under your pillow. I'll give you a maslahah. I'll put it every single day. So the man had to think, and then he said, okay. So he goes home. When he wakes up the next morning, there's no dirham. The axe didn't produce anything. There's no dirham. So when the man goes back to the tree, some are going to say that part. When the man goes back to the tree the next day, he's resolved to bring the tree down. So he finally made it again. And says, why are you trying to cut the tree? He said, you're going to give me the dirham, and I'm going to cut it because I don't want the people to sway from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he wrestled, but this time Shaitan beats it. So the man said, Shaitan, how did you beat me today? He said, yesterday you came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I had no power over you. Today you came for the dirham, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give you any power over you. And that's the frightening aspect that Selma told me a story that she read in some book. But this story, when I heard it, I said to SubhanAllah, this answers the dilemma in regards to the genocide. When you have it because you have nothing to eat, because you were so heartbroken at a genocide, that you are willing to do anything, if it's preaching, sharing, etc. Because of that, Megan Wright looked into the Quran and 2 weeks later became Muslim. Sean Green opened the Quran and ended up becoming Muslim. I was with the other day, quoting hadith and the Quran off the top of the head. I'm not talking about hadith that came in Amal of the year, like even though they're valuable. But I mean not the basic hadith that you learn. He's quoting complicated meaning. He's learning people entering Islam because they see a power in the deen that is greater than the missile. You see a power in the deen of Islam that is greater than the Zionist superiority in regards to the material wealth and the lobbying and the like. What is the power? I only remember when you mentioned convert. What is convert seeing the power that you who were born Muslim are unable to see? What is the power of Allah that they see manifest? That you are blinded to it. You believe that everything is going into tragedy and disgrace, when in reality it's the Zionists who are panicking. And this is the point that I made. Why are you tired when Netanyahu is panicking? Why are you tired when the Zionists are panicking? Why are you tired when they're trying to change regulations in universities because you moved? Why are you tired when they're trying to ban TikTok because your voice was loud? How can you be tired when you're winning? How can you be tired when you're shifting the tide? How can you be tired when an enemy that you thought was so overwhelming is finally revealing the weaknesses for no other reason than you chose to move with the limited powers, and the collective voice of the Ummah is shaking the whole narrative from around the world? This is not the time earlier before we walked in, we said, what should be the aim of what we're doing over here? And somebody mentioned fatigue, the tiredness. How can you be tired of fatigue when you're winning, when 1 year on from what happened in October 7th, and I'm not getting involved in what happened in it is condemned by anybody, including those in Islam. The reason I always say the thing is condemned is because they believe killing civilians is fine. They did in Afghanistan, they did it in Iraq, for them it's normal. They can't believe that someone would automatically revolt against it. But the point that I'm saying is that in that 1 year, we've seen changes we never thought could happen. And I think the lesson from Gaza, and the lesson everybody should take away from this, is before you didn't move the way you move today. Before you weren't moving with the same urgency you move today. Which is why the urgency with which you move today produced in 11 months what you couldn't produce in 20 years. So the lesson of Gaza is to imagine what you could achieve if you continue the momentum and keep moving. And that's why I by the fact, move, just keep moving, just don't stop. It's not about what is the right path moving forward. It's that as long as for the sake of justice, Allah will bring these pieces together the same way He brought us together with Yaqeen. We had never met before that podcast beforehand, thinking which led to Yaqeen, which led to the American. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in my view, saw these parallel paths going together and said, these people who are moving, bring them together and let them reinforce and amplify. And that's why my mother always used to say, may Allah bless her, she said, Tammy, the path you decide to take, Allah sends the relevant people for that path. If you choose to embark on the path of justice, Allah will send you the people who will help you to deliver justice. And if you choose the path of comfort, Allah will send you those who will only preserve that comfort and turn you into a people of humiliation. And alhamdulillah, if I'm sitting with Imam Sam, I must be doing something like that.
Now, my read on Muslim speech here in the US, and maybe we'll end on this and we'll see if there's questions, is that the people are disappointed in leadership. That the people are actually ahead. I've actually been surprised in the last 12 months at how many people who maybe were suspicious or doubtful as to the power that they wield. I see a lot of people waking up. I see a lot of people who your message, what I've been trying to tell people, what Jalal has been trying to tell people, what other people are trying to tell other people, it resonates. But they're disappointed that the institutions that we've had thus far are not necessarily getting it. We're not leading the way. What would you say to those people in this situation?
We were raised in a household where our parents would always use Sirah and life of Sahaba as reference points. I want to make my dad proud by using one here. Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu ta'ala receives more spoils than he's entitled to after a particular battle. When news reaches Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he says that if Khalid took it without knowing, then he's become negligent. And if he took it knowingly, then it's an offense. Either way, it's chief to remove him as chief of staff of the army. When Khalid ibn Walid reaches Medina, Umar Khattab tells Bilal Rabah, one of the other Sahabatim, Bilal, that when Khalid enters the masjid, take his turban off and tie his head. If you look at all the Sahaba, right, it's one of the most important institutions that is built in the Muslim society. Khalid ibn Walid, sword of Allah, and this is the sword of Allah. Umar Khattab eventually devotes Khalid ibn Walid. Khalid ibn Walid was angry for 3-4 days. But he accepted when Ubayd al-Jarrah says to him, I can replace you. Khalid says, go make a manship. That's for me. And Khalid went to Syria. Then he quelled any suggestion of dissent by naming Umar Khattab as the executive of the state. But Umar writes an interesting letter. Umar ibn Khattab realized that Sahaba, this is one of the main organizations, main institutions of our community. And you know, I'm not too eager to see it change, or to see it replaced, or to see something new. So Umar Khattab writes a letter and he says, Wallahi, I did not remove Khalid, except that I fear people would say that victory comes from Khalid, not Allah. Muhammad Hassan said in his book, wrote, it was not Muslims that made Islam great, it is Islam that made Muslims great. What made the Ummah great was its ability that there are some institutions that serve the purpose of the purpose one time, and deserve Allah to care. And there is a new era in the new church that requires new leadership. We had Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu ta'ala, today we need Ubayd al-Jarrah radiallahu anhu. We might need Sa'ad Abi Waqqas, we might need Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu. Each one in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are vehicles that are used. Ubayd al-Jarrah is not necessarily better than Khalid or the like, but all of them, Allah used them as vehicles. And Umar al-Khattab was making this point. Do not hold on to a vehicle that is no longer serving its purpose. Do not hold on to a leader that is no longer serving their purpose. Umar al-Khattab himself made it, Allah do not give me a position longer than my ability to serve in it. Allahumma, leave only the one who is talented in this position. If I need to step down, let me step down if I see somebody who's more talented. I always say, and it's not just because I'm doing Yaqeen. People can testify that I asked this question even before Yaqeen. I asked, why is it that Yaqeen as an organization compared to other organizations, how is it that yes, we have Sheikh Muhammad Philip, but we have so many people that we got around it, etc. It's because there is a structure here that says that one is not greater than the institution. It's the institution and the vehicle is the individual which is the prize. And that's why I always say, and I say it in a roundabout way. And I'll say it, I'll use my words if I use exactly. Somebody said to me, and we are feeling but the organizations are not moving at our pace. What can we do to convince them? And I said 5 hearts. I remember organizations, they said the community is moving too quickly, we want to slow down. You know, and I said, you risk being rendered obsolete because the Ummah keeps moving. The Ummah elevates those leaders that are relevant to the time. It's for you to adapt to the Ummah, not the Ummah to adapt to you. Let you adapt to serve the needs of the Ummah at that particular time. Then barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah al-khair. You were wonderful once upon a time. That's not taken away. Khalid ibn Walid was wonderful, radiallahu anhu. When he took Iraq and Syria, it's for Ubayd ibn Jarrah, radiallahu ta'ala. And then Amr ibn after him to be the next stage, radiallahu anhu ajma'in. It doesn't take away from each other. It's not about, this is bad, this is good. It's that we have a time, we need a leader. You're not there, Allah, to elevate somebody who is at this moment in time. And this is why the Ummah has survived for 1,400 years. Because the Ummah is able to refresh its leadership. The Ummah is able to retire leadership. I'm not saying that should happen here. I'm saying the Ummah is able to find new leaders. Why? Because what inspires this Ummah is not a personality in terms of the leadership. What inspires it is a message delivered by the Prophet of Allah, by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said that if you move for the sake of Allah, Allah will give you from where you do not expect. يزدكم قوة إلى قوتكم ويؤيدكم, and He gives you assistance from angels. Allah will give you Dawood alayhi salam. He'll bring from you Talut alayhi salam. When he was appointed Talut, Imam, so what did the community say? What did the Talut? Shu'aib alayhi salam, we do not see you as someone from us, but Allah elevated him. If these organizations do not want to lead this initiative, then allow the space for Talut, allow the space for Dawood, allow the space for Sulaiman, allow the space for Ubayd ibn Jarrah, allow the space for Amr ibn As. For Wallahi, they are there. They just need you to listen to just a little bit, mashallah. So we just put some questions, we have questions. So we have questions. Let's wait. Damn it. Do you have any final words you'd like to say? I think that the final thing that I can say is this. Whatever happens as a consequence of our move is not what should make you move. The idea that you will achieve something should not be a condition on which you move. For the Quran is full of examples of Nuh alayhi salam, who for 900 years gave da'wah, to the extent when we say رب إني دعوت قومي ليلا ونهارا ولم يزدهم دعائي إلا فرارا وإني كلما دعوتني تغفر لهم جعلوا أصابع في آذانهم واستغفروا ثيابهم وأصروا واستكبروا استكبارا. I call to my people, I call to my people day and night. And every time I call them, they run away from me. And when I call them, it's to my position, they put their fingers in their ears and they cover their faces and they treat me with arrogance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about Ashab al-Ukhdud. The ending was not what you would imagine you would like the ending to be like. Allah gives all of these very different examples. But this is why I think that what does it mean to be successful in Islam? And that's why we came back to the point of struggle. What made the Rasulullah great? It wasn't the land he conquered. It wasn't the wealth he had. By the time he died, Rome was still a superpower and so was Persia, but he predicted they would fall. His magnificence was that people would move knowing they might not see the outcome. His magnificence was he convinced an ummah to move even if they believed they would not achieve it, because they weren't desperate for an outcome. They were desperate for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were desperate to be good with Allah with you. They were desperate to hear when they died, يَا أَيَّتُهَا النَّفْسُ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةِ ارْجِعِي إِلَىٰ رَبِّكِ رَاضِيَةً مَرْضِيَّةً. Come back to Allah. Allah is pleased with you. This is what they were striving for. This is what the French could not understand when they were in Algeria. We have taken over their land. We have persecuted them. We beat up their men. We shame their women. Why do they not succumb and why do they not just accept the status quo? What makes them move? What makes them keep going? What makes them willing to give everything for the sake of something higher than them? What makes them move and resist us when we have the material superiority? We commit a massacre, they keep moving. We go and abuse them, they keep moving. We do all sorts of harm and all sorts of torture. And we do the most inhumane things. We blow up the heads of their kids. But this community keeps moving. What is it? Make me understand what this message is. The glory of Islam, the beauty and magnificence of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not that he covered upset, he wasn't there. It was that he put the spirit in people's hearts. If I don't do it, let me pave the way for somebody else to do it. Let me keep moving. If I don't see it, I'll meet in Jannah the person who did it, and then I'll hear the full story. Let me strive because the dunya is for them and Jannah is for us. That's the magnificence. Do not move on the basis that you want to see an outcome in your life. Do not pursue this cause on the basis that you believe you have to see the liberation in your lifetime. Pursue it that you want the ultimate success that any Muslim can have, which is, and this is what gets me out of bed every night. When I feel the sadness of when I see Sigur's picture with the legs blown up and she's hanging on the wall. When I see him with other 350 bullets stuck in her car. When I see him with the picture of her with her grandfather, when I see the heads of his kids blown up. When I see the utter inhumanity. When I see that there are people who are willing to forgive the genocide. When I see that there is a global order that is sanctioning what is happening, I would prefer to see these Zionists bomb the living daylights and set the world on fire than stop them and stop this genocide. Let's do it. What keeps me going is this, is that Allahumma, I know that you exist. Allahumma, I know that your will is manifest. Allahumma, I know that your promise is true. Allahumma, I know that you've already appointed a time for this promise. Allahumma, on this basis, I will move. Allahumma, I'm trying to come up with these eloquent arguments and I don't know how eloquent they are. I'm trying, Ya Rabb, and I do it for you. Allahumma, I'm worried about what the consequences might be. I know I'm doing activism and luxury, but I'm worried something else will come. Allahumma, make me strong in doing it. Allahumma, I'm trying to call on my people, doing research, what are their fears, how can I judge them? Allahumma, I don't like flying, I'm getting on those planes, I hate turbulence, Allahumma, I'm doing it, but instead what I'm doing, Ya Rabbi, please accept this from me. I'm not the one who's going to deliver the victory. I know it's only you, Ya Rabbi subhanahu, but Ya Rabbi, I imagine, and it may well be in Imam, that on our deathbed, we are sitting there, maybe we are WhatsApping each other, and we say, our time has come, the world is in a worse place. The world is in a horrible place. Killings are still happening. The global order is still messed. And we will tell each other, maybe were we wrong to, maybe our arguments in the podcast was wrong. Maybe we should have focused on a different angle. Maybe we should have done this. Maybe we should have done that. Maybe, you know what, Imam Tom, maybe I didn't think about it properly. We weren't as wise as we thought we were. Maybe we should have accepted it now. And the ruh starts leaving the body and we say, SubhanAllah, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and it leaves. And this is what peace will do. I imagine the angel will say, I imagine. As I'm weeping with the heart, they put everything that happened. I imagine the angel will say, oh beautiful, sweet smelling soul. Oh lovely soul, wonderful soul. The angel will say, you're not supposed to do. If the angel say there's no point, what impact does the voice have? But they kept going regardless. They couldn't see the outcome, but they kept moving. They said the sister's impregnable, they kept moving. The odds are against you, they kept moving. They said, we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They kept moving, they said, oh sweet, beautiful, smelling soul. Come, why are you crying? Come, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. Allah is celebrating you. Allah will say, look at my servant. I gave them a promise and look how they move. I didn't show them Jannah, but look at how they move. Like the hadith of the angel, they talk about my Jannah. Have they seen it? No, they haven't seen it. Then I will give them the Jannah. So look how they move based on the promise. Irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. And he knows. A friend of mine from Bosnia, when they asked him about the genocide, he said, my dream is that when I sit in Jannah, I want Allah to show me the full tape. I want Him to show me from beginning to end. And one of the Americans who heard the story said, Subhanallah, do you know what struck me the most? Look how he dreams. I want to be in Jannah and I trust Allah and I want Allah to show me how He made His justice manifest. Dream of these things in that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day, I will stand before Him and so will you. Allah will not ask you about things that you are unable to achieve. He will say, I gave you power, I gave you a voice, I gave you money, I gave you comfort, I gave you luxury, I gave you everything in the dunya. What did you do with it? I gave you the money. It's not your work. I gave it to you. I blessed you with it. What did you do with it? I gave you the microphone. I did the camera. What did you do with it? And the frightening thing is, can you imagine somebody who will see somebody and they will say, you know, this person, his voice that he raised more than frightened Netanyahu, but you sat at home and you did nothing. Don't be like saying, I wish I did something. More than you will see that the water starts flowing and chances will open up. And this is why I finish on this point. It's not a matter of whether you have power or not. Everybody has power. Martin Luther King, it's a universal particular concept. Martin Luther King said if you can fly. You can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. You can't walk, why keep moving? بلوا عني ولو آية. من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده. If you see something wrong, change it with your hand. If you can't, then change it with your tongue. Speak out. Speak out and do something with the genocide. Speak out and do something to children. Speak out and do something for battling the Zionists. Speak out and do something. The world is shifting because you're moving. Don't look at each other and say, what are we achieving? You're winning. You are making them buckle. Britain is buckling. Biden is buckling. The genociders are buckling. Macron is buckling. The Belgian deputy PM is buckling. The ICJ is buckling. The EU, why are they buckling? They're buckling because you're moving. Only a person would turn around after this and say, I'm going home, there's no point. Move and keep moving, you're winning. And Bismillah, Allah has written the victory will come. And one day, كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. Allah will remove everything. He will say, Allah will release من المؤمنين لله الواحد القهار. It's the Jannah like you can see it. And I always say, and I try to finish on this point, well, we are feeling the Jannah series. What's the Jannah series? It's the first time somebody encouraged me to envisage Jannah. I've never watched it before. I'm saying, I don't know how far I'm fine. I'll be about work in the first Jannah. I'll say that. I'm not the kind of guy who should imagine it. So you see when he has the life behind him and he's talking about it in that lovely way that he talks, you know, like that. That night I went and lay down in my bed. I lay down in my bed, and usually I put my head on the pillow and I come out. What are we doing now? What are we doing now? Thank you. You described it for me, right? So I think I can use it for reason and think about first dinner. I want to think about those just first dinner. And what you realize when you imagine it is the first dinner, you go through everything you wanted to do, which takes you a few hours. Let's say you went to bed at 10 o'clock, by like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., you've exhausted everything that you have wanted to do. By the time you've exhausted it, you tell yourself, you get to a place where you're like, I'm here. I may as well see what second Jannah looks like. I may as well imagine it. But when you get to second Jannah, you're imagining things that you didn't think that you liked or wanted. Because you've completed dunya. So what is it that I would like that I have not considered? So you start thinking about prophets that you would meet in the second Jannah, third Jannah. By the time it gets to 4 a.m., Fajr is 6:15. 4 a.m., you're on the 4th or 5th Jannah. I may as well. I'm here. I'm here.
Find a new rival.
You can see the 7th Jannah at 6:14, one minute before the Adhan of Fajr. The reason why I'm saying it is I want everybody to imagine it. What is it that Ansar saw in the promise of Jannah that made them move? I would imagine that one thing when you walk in, you keep living in the car, you see Sadat, you know, Khalid ibn Walid, you see Abu Bakr, you walk in, you know, I like imagine the scenario where you know, sitting on the winter, and I love this, they're doing it every night. You know, when you walk by, and because you're limited in your imagination, you can't imagine what Jannah looks like. So you imagine it in terms of someone in New York or someone in London or whatever. You walk by, you're over there. You really one guy says, you know, I'm so yeah, Rasulullah and yeah, Mu'mineen, when I liberated the Makkah, I came in and I took that baby and the baby and I established Islam and the other person says, Mufti Salah ad-Din, when you entered, what was the law that you imposed? He said, yeah, Umar al-Khattab, I imposed the same law that you imposed in Al-Aqsa. He's like, of course, I'm not going to walk straight past. You're going to walk in. I'm doing this. It's 6:14. You know, the seconds are ticking. I don't have long. You don't say Salaam alaikum. Alaikum salam. Are you Salah bin Eid and Umar Khattab? Yes, I'm Salah bin Umar Khattab. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. It's wonderful to be here with you. Which generation are you from? Allah, yeah, from a miserable generation. You could have found a genocide, but we were unwilling to shape the status quo because we've established an alpha in it. So we didn't think it was going to work. But I tried. I used to roll across America. In this country, you know, so like you know, it was 4 hours to fly from Detroit to Arizona. 4 hours at that time was longer than London to Istanbul. You should have seen the Raleigh to California. 5 hours, 15 minutes. It was almost from London to Riyadh, etc. But you know, we tried to do this, etc. say to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, you're saying, but this time you feel guilty. Ya Rasulullah, we weren't like your generation. We tried and moved and pushed and then somebody else will walk in. And the other person will say, no, Salam alaikum, you Salam alaikum, Salam. Rasulullah will say, to what generation are you from? And he will say, we are from the generation of liberated Al-Aqsa in 2060. Very close, it's all that. I don't know if you're jealous in Jannah, but you think yourself is nothing. That's the end. How did it come? What was the, when I say Muhammad al-Fatih, what did he know that the others did not know? That the person goes into Islam. It's just my name that Sheikh Ahmad said. I imagine that, you walk in, before you sit down, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ayyub and Umar Khattab, Imam Sa'atini, and inshallah, and Umar Sulaiman, and Abdul Udr, and Ghani. Before you sit down, he looks at me and he goes, do we know you? Do we know you? Ya Rasulullah, you know, I used to watch these guys on your phone, and I used to watch this. And they used to say, the Ummah is strong, you're powerful, you can do it, join the company, you go fight, go fight, protest, go do this, yes, step up in, yes, you're winning. And you made me believe it. I'd watch him until I believed it. And so I would go when I was protest, I would go to the encampment, I would spend my money to Sabilillah, I would go, and Ya Rasulullah, one thing led to another. They believed it. We could see it as if we could see it right in front of us. They painted the picture for us, Ya Rasulullah. They painted the picture what Jannah looks like. They painted the picture what liberation looks like. And one thing led to another. And then eventually, Ya Rasulullah, I finally got to pray in Al-Aqsa, but it didn't happen without the efforts of those who came before they paved the way for us. Alhamdulillah, I find you here. Ya Rasulullah, we are not there without that generation that came before us, that paved the way for us. I accept that bit part wrong. If you would call it a bit far wrong. If the reward is for those, if the reward is Jannah, if the reward is sitting with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, give me the bit far wrong. Give me Sumayya radiallahu anha, even though she wasn't a bit far wrong. Give me Sumayya radiallahu anha. Give me Sa'd ibn Umayr. Give me whoever. When next time that book is put in my hand, I'm ready to be any one of the Sahaba if it means that I'll get there. But the best thing that I imagine, just 58 seconds just before the event comes in, I didn't realize that I could love something so much until I imagined it. Because once you get to control with the Prophet Muhammad, the question is, what is there left for me to see? And there's only one thing left, which is a promise that I learned about but never thought about. I never contemplated it. It never moved me over life. It is that maybe Rasulullah would stand up and say, Ya Ibadallah, stand up, we have a meeting. What's a meeting with Ya Rasulullah? Allah is about to reveal His veil. It's done. You are here for eternity, is about to reveal His veil. And Allah looks at you, you finally see the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He says, Ya Ibadallah Salihin, Ya Ibadallah, if you look at my promise, oh you, look at what I prepared for you, look at what was waiting for you, look at me, do you feel pain here? Was the dunya worth it? Look where you are today. Look, have it for eternity. Have it forever. ادخلوها بسلام ذلك يوم الخلود لهم ما يشاءون فيها ولدينا مزيد فيها سرر مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة. Allah said, have it. I always wanted you to be here. All I needed was for you to trust me. Oh, you who trusted me. Oh, you who trusted me without seeing me. ادخلوها بسلام. Enter my Jannah, فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. I think that is worth moving for, regardless of what happens in this dunya. Let's enjoy the journey and see where life is.
After that, we're gonna do it. Thank you very much for coming in. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والعاقبة للمتقين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. inshallah ta'ala, dear brothers and sisters, tonight we will continue and finish the story of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, our mother, may Allah be pleased with her. This part of her life, people ask me, so what are we doing next? They didn't realize there's another lecture after last week's lecture when we talked about Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. But this part of her life is very interesting because it's after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it actually makes up the majority of her life. So to give you some perspective, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, she would have been around 20 years old. She would live for a whole 5 decades, up to 50 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the majority of her life is after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The vast majority of her life, proportionately, is her life after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But her entire life basically surrounds that decade that she had with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she spent 1 decade with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and everything afterwards is about extending the legacy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you start to see how the love story now unfolds. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ passed away in her house, that home was still going to be a centerpiece of Medina. But now, instead of the Prophet ﷺ coming out of that home to meet the people, it is Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha teaching from that home all of the things that we knew about the Prophet ﷺ and did not know about the Prophet ﷺ in a way that we could love him even more and appreciate him even more. But subhanAllah, in all of the narrations about the Prophet ﷺ and her in Jannah together. Because remember, Jibreel alayhi salam told the Prophet ﷺ, this is your wife in this dunya and in Jannah. This is going to be your wife in this life and in the next life. And the Prophet ﷺ used to say that to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, to give her the glad tidings of that, and she's the only wife other than Khadija radiallahu anha who Jibreel alayhi salam would send his salam to. So she has all of these glad tidings. But do you remember the part where the Prophet ﷺ is passing away and she says that I realized at that moment that he's not going to choose us? There's such a profound narration in Muslim Imam Ahmad where the Prophet ﷺ said, لقد رأيت عائشة في الجنة كأني أنظر إلى بياض كفيها ليهون بذلك علي عند موتي. So I'm going to say it again. لقد رأيت عائشة في الجنة كأني أنظر إلى بياض كفيها ليهون بذلك علي عند موتي. So he says sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in this narration that I was shown Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha in Jannah from until today. Aisha, our mother, the most beloved person to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when she lived in his time, without any doubt. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you went up to him and you saw the love that he treated everybody with, and you asked him, Man ahabbu an-nas ilayk, who is the most beloved person to you? He would say without hesitation, Aisha radiallahu anha. He would not stutter, he would not hesitate. And she was also his preferred company, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whether he was resident or whether he was traveling. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would cast lots, he always hoped that it would land on Aisha radiallahu anha so she could be with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was present in his home, he preferred no residence like the residence of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. And as some of the scholars said, it was as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave her the keys to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of his happiness. She knew how to make the Prophet ﷺ happy, and she spent that entire time with the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, bringing joy to his life, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And when we talk about our mothers, Ummahatul Mu'mineen, and we love all of our mothers, there are more ahadith about and from Aisha radiallahu anha than all of the other wives of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam combined. And so to tell her story is extremely difficult in any limited period of time, because even the ahadith that are not about her, they are through her lens radiallahu ta'ala anha, and they come with that clear love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even as she narrates the most intimate moments with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so when you read about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam through the lens of Aisha radiallahu anha, you love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam even more, which is in and of itself remarkable. Because the person that saw him most praised him most. You love the Prophet ﷺ more, and you love the woman that's telling the story, Aisha, our mother, radiallahu ta'ala anha. There is no other person in our deen who has a greater number of exclusive narrations about the Prophet ﷺ. Now what do I mean by that? There's one companion who narrated more ahadith than her, and that is Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. But Abu Hurairah, most of his narrations are corroborated, meaning other Sahaba narrate the same thing. Okay, so you take the entire body of his ahadith. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu is the narrator of the largest number of ahadith. But the largest number of exclusive narrations, meaning only Aisha radiallahu anha saw this and could tell us about this. There is no other companion, male or female, that matches Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. And she was given to the Prophet ﷺ as a divine gift, as we will see. SubhanAllah, you will notice, and it is remarkable, the mission of the Prophet ﷺ started as he came home to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha in her arms, and the mission of the Prophet ﷺ ended in the arms of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent these two women at the perfect time. The Prophet ﷺ needed a Khadija, and there was no other woman that could be to the Prophet ﷺ what Khadija radiallahu anha was throughout that time of Mecca. No other woman that would be more comforting, that would bear more of the hardship, that would stand and give, and that could inform the journey of the Prophet ﷺ and comfort him throughout the way, like our mother Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And in Medina, there is no other woman that could bring more joy to the Prophet ﷺ and fulfillment, and to be with him, especially in the place of the great sadness that he felt with the void of Khadija radiallahu anha, than our mother Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. And subhanAllah, it's interesting because even if you look at the names, and I always say pay attention to the names, Khadija, some of you might remember the name Khadija actually means premature. So some of the scholars of language, they say that if a baby came early, preterm baby, they said it was Khadija. So Khadija was premature in that she was ahead of her time, radiallahu ta'ala anha. And Aisha radiallahu anha is full of life. And subhanAllah, she brought so much life to the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to this ummah by extension. Until today, the life of Aisha radiallahu anha brings life to the pages of the books of Seerah that you are reading. And so they both come at a perfect time in his life sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and both serve a very unique function that we benefit from and we praise in the life of our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She is the daughter of Abdullah ibn Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abdullah ibn Uthman, also known as, please answer this right, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Or some guys, you need to go back and read 99. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, his actual name was Abdullah ibn Uthman, and her mother was a woman by the name of Ruman bint Amir ibn Uwaymir. So another Uwaymir. Ruman bint Amir ibn Uwaymir from the tribe of Kinana. Now just like Abu Bakr is a nickname for Abdullah, Ruman, some of the scholars say her name was actually Zainab, but we don't know that for sure. So Ruman is the mother of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. And she is, as she is titled by Imam al-Zahabi rahimahullah, Bint al-Imam al-Siddiq al-Akbar, the daughter of the Imam, the great Siddiq, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the greatest human being after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after the prophets who the sun has risen or set upon. And there's something profound about that, because Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu wanted to be by the side of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in every moment of his life, and wanted to support the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with everything that he had. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no one benefited me more with their money, their spending, their support than Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And subhanAllah, even his offspring was of a greater benefit to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam than anyone could possibly be. And that is also from his sidq. That's from his truthfulness in wanting to be by the side of the Prophet ﷺ and benefit the Prophet ﷺ and bring happiness to the Prophet ﷺ and support him in his mission that he loved the Prophet ﷺ so much that he even showed him his daughter. That it transferred to his daughter. And you will notice, when we get to part 2 of this series on Aisha radiallahu anha, that every single one of her incidents of anger is out of jealousy for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's as if it transferred, a love transferred for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Aisha radiallahu anha, and she becomes the greatest source of comfort to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his home. Now, as we said, Aisha's mother is Ruman. So this is just a biographical point that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was married to 2 women before Islam. One of them was a woman by the name of Qutayla, and she is the mother of Asma bint Abi Bakr. Qutayla is the mother of Asma bint Abi Bakr. So Asma bint Abi Bakr is the half-sister of Aisha. Okay? And then Ruman, who gave birth to Aisha and Abdurrahman. Ruman, who gave birth to Aisha and Abdurrahman. Now Qutayla did not embrace Islam. Okay? So they were divorced. Ruman embraced Islam and became a woman of Jannah, as the Prophet ﷺ described her. And then later on, and we'll talk about the death of Ruman inshallah ta'ala at some point, later on, Asma bint Umays, the widow of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, and another woman later on named Habiba, and you would have Muhammad and Kulthum. So Aisha is the only daughter of Ruman, and she only has one full sibling, Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr, who did not embrace Islam right away. So Abdurrahman radiallahu anhu embraces Islam later on. So for a time in the household, it is Abu Bakr and Ruman and Aisha and her half-sister who grew up with her, Asma, as well as Abdullah. I forgot to mention Abdullah, also from Qutayla, Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr. So that is the household of believers. Now, what are some of the names of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha that you will find her in the tradition list? The most beautiful one is that she would be called Habibatu Habibillah. Habibatu Habibillah. The beloved one of the beloved one of Allah. Habibatu Habibillah. And Masruq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he would narrate from her, he would narrate from her as As-Siddiqa bint As-Siddiq Habibatu Habibillah. As-Siddiqa, the truthful woman, the daughter of the truthful man, the beloved one of the beloved one of Allah. As-Siddiqa bint As-Siddiq Habibatu Habibillah radiyallahu ta'ala anha wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam also gave her a very particular analogy. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned 4 women who perfected their iman. And 2 of them were from his own family sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Khadija, our mother Khadija radiyallahu anha, perfected her iman. Fatima radiallahu anha, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, perfected her iman. Maryam alayhi salam perfected her iman. And Asiya alayhi salam perfected her iman. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, فضل عائشة على النساء كفضل الثريد على سائر الطعام. And the superiority of Aisha after that. So the ranking of the women here, our mother Khadija radiallahu anha is greater than our mother Aisha radiallahu anha. And we have a narration about that later on. Right? So Khadija always stays number 1. Fatima radiallahu anha is a part of the Prophet ﷺ, also occupies that position of the queen of the women of Jannah. Right? But then the Prophet ﷺ said, if you were to compare Aisha to the rest of the women, she is like farid, a dish called farid, over all other meals. What does that mean? Farid was considered the most prized and fulfilling dish of the food of the earth. So as if to say, Aisha radiallahu anha brought a sense of fulfillment. She filled every room, she brought joy wherever she went radiallahu anha, and her rank and her superiority, her public, her actual virtue is like the virtue of that dish over everything else. I'm not even going to start comparing biryani and makluba and things of that sort, because it's just going to get messy here and I don't want to cause a fitna between the people here. But this is the best dish of all. It's Aisha radiallahu anha. Then it's everybody else, right? And some of the names that she also had were nicknames that the Prophet ﷺ would call her by, and Rasulullah ﷺ would call her Aish, and also Ruwayt, which is little Aisha. So Aish is simply shortening the name of Aisha, as well as Ruwayt, which is little Aisha. She also had the nickname of Humayra. Why Humayra? Humayra, because Aisha radiallahu anha was described as a beautiful woman with a reddish complexion. And she used to have a reddish complexion, especially when she got shy or when she got mad. You could easily tell Aisha radiallahu anha by her redness, right? So she turned red when she got shy and she turned red when she got mad. So she is Humayra. She is also described as Humayra, which comes from the color red. She's also Abdullah. It was a very interesting nickname. Abdullah. Aisha did not have a son named Abdullah, the mother of Abdullah. But she said to the Prophet ﷺ, she looked around and she saw that everyone else is this person, that person, this person. So she said, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Nabi Allah, أَلَا تُكَنِّينِي? Will you not give me a kunya, which is something, the mother of something? Of course, it's common back then. You're the father of someone or the mother of someone, even if it's in hopes of a future child or something of that sort. So the Prophet ﷺ said, take the kunya bi-ibniki, by your son. Who was he referring to? Abdullah ibn Zubayr, who is the son of Asma bint Abi Bakr. So your nephew, Abdullah. And this shows us a lesson, by the way. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Khala manzilatil. Your maternal aunt is like your mom. Your maternal aunt has a station in Islam. She is like your mom. So your Khala is like your mom. So he said to her, why don't you call yourself Abdullah after your nephew, Abdullah ibn Zubayr? And so she took that. And she loved Abdullah ibn Zubayr a lot. And so that was a special connection that existed there as well. Now let's talk a little bit about her childhood and her immediate qualities here and how that's going to play out as she grows up, watching the seerah unfold. First of all, her qualities are very similar to her father. So she took after Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu in many of her qualities. She had a fondness for camels. And this was also a characteristic of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, hence the name Abu Bakr. Bakr is a camel, okay? So she had a fondness for camels, but more than that, she loved poetry, she studied ancestry. These are skills that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had. She was eloquent, she was sharp, and these are all qualities of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So her natural qualities were like the qualities of her father. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was a deeply perceptive man, articulate man, and an honest man, right? And he loved some of the harder subjects of literature and poetry, and he excelled in dream interpretation and things of that sort. Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was growing up, she exhibited these types of qualities very early on, just like her father. SubhanAllah, later on, the love of the Quran, the love of charity, and the love of the Prophet ﷺ. Three things that are very Abu Bakr-like: the love of the Quran, the love of charity, and the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what was her childhood like? She's very different in that the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ went through a period of disbelief and unbelief and were all previously married, right? Aisha radiallahu anha says, this is my childhood. لَمْ أَعْقِلْ أَبَوَيَّ قَطٌّ إِلَّا وَهُمَا يَدِينَانِ الدِّينِ. She said, I don't remember a time of my life except that my parents were Muslims. Meaning I was born Muslim and I was raised Muslim. So Aisha radiallahu anha was born after the Prophet ﷺ received revelation. Therefore she says, I don't remember a time where my parents were not upon the religion of La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. And she says, وَلَمْ يَمُرَّ عَلَيْنَا يَوْمٌ إِلَّا يَأْتِينَا فِيهِ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ طَرَفَيِ النَّهَارِ بُكْرَةً وَعَشِيًّا. I can't recall a single day from my childhood except that the Prophet ﷺ used to visit our house day and night. So every day of my childhood was marked by my parents struggling with Islam and the Prophet ﷺ visiting us in our home at least twice a day. He would come to us one time in the day, he'd come to us one time in the evening. So this is her childhood, seeing the Prophet ﷺ come over every single day, twice a day. So she's getting a pretty good glimpse of him sallallahu alaihi wasallam well before she will marry him. And she's also seeing the plans. She's seeing her parents sitting with the Prophet ﷺ. She's seeing the discussions about how they're going to escape persecution, She's living through the boycott. She's living through the torture. And subhanAllah, there's an irony. Does anyone remember who tortured her father? Who tortured Abu Bakr as-Siddiq? Does anyone remember? Come on, I just heard a bunch of names shouted out. Not Abu Jahl.
Hey, are these the same people Cos be running from when they be in the lobby?
It's actually the brother of Khadija. The irony. Nufal ibn Khuwaylid, the brother of Khadija radiallahu anha, used to tie Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu up and used to beat him up. So her father's persecutor, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, will come home bruised up, beaten up by the brother of Khadija radiallahu anha. SubhanAllah, the irony in how Islam truly separated the fates of people. You know, imagine you have Khadija on one hand receiving the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the best friend of the Prophet ﷺ. We have the Prophet ﷺ's brother-in-law beating up his best friend in this way. So she would see her father coming home with the marks of torture. She would see her father defending the Prophet ﷺ with his body when the Prophet ﷺ is stoned and abused in public. She can recall those incidents from her childhood. Remember Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu being beat up so much that he went unconscious one day, right? Protecting the Prophet ﷺ around the Kaaba and literally being beaten to a point of unconsciousness. Aisha radiallahu anha's childhood is marked by her father being abused in defense of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She grew up watching her father gather the money from the home, and what would he do with the money? He'd go and he'd free the slaves. So she remembers her father in Mecca going out and freeing Bilal radiallahu anhu and freeing Khabbab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And these were, of course, considered people that had no worldly worth. But Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was seeking something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So she remembered the way that when any money would come into the house, her father would go out and he would immediately free the people that were being persecuted from the slave class. She remembered her mother and her father trying to memorize Surah Al-Najm and the things that they memorized in Dar al-Arqam. So her parents would go out to Dar al-Arqam, study with the Prophet ﷺ, and she could remember her parents trying to perfect the memorization of Mekki Quran. This is her childhood. It's very significant because you would see these things playing out later on. And her description of her father is that he could not control his eyes when he would read the Quran. So imagine the daughter Aisha radiallahu anha looking at her father Abu Bakr weeping as he reads this revelation from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And remember that the most difficult days of the Prophet ﷺ correlate the beginning of her life in that, she was born, obviously, early on and after the revelation of the Prophet ﷺ, but her memory starts, like most people's memories start right at the age of 5, 6, 7. Her memories start at the time of the boycott, right? At the time of the worst persecution of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's go to the Prophet ﷺ and how the marriage is going to come into being. Now, if you recall the Prophet ﷺ after the death of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, it was unusual for a person of the age of the Prophet ﷺ to not be married in Mecca. Very unusual. In fact, it was very unusual to be married to only one person, right? Because at that time, the majority of men would marry multiple women. And the Prophet ﷺ was now in his 50s, going into his mid-50s, and he's only married to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. And if you read the life of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, knowing her love and her support for the Prophet ﷺ, do you really think she would have given the Prophet ﷺ a hard time if he carried out the practice like everyone else used to carry out the practice at the time? No. But the Prophet ﷺ and Khadija radiallahu anha had a very unique and special relationship that would not end with her death. In fact, it would continue onward, to where Aisha's entire life now would be a mention of Khadija every single day, which she actually didn't remember. Because by the time Aisha radiallahu anha really woke up to this world, Khadija radiallahu anha had already passed away. Okay? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in a deep state of sadness. A single father. A deep state of sadness and a single father, and it was perplexing why he wouldn't be married sallallahu alaihi wasallam. was not the way that they were accustomed to. Right? Not the way that they were accustomed to. And then you have a few dreams that happen. So let's start with a dream. The Prophet ﷺ, for 3 nights in a row, قال أريتك في المنام 3 ليال جاء بك الملك في سرقة حرير وفي رواية خضراء. The Prophet ﷺ said, for 3 nights, Jibreel alayhi salam came to me in a dream, and he had a green silk cloth. And he said, هذه زوجتك في الدنيا والآخرة. This is your wife in this life and in Jannah. So it's not even just a bushra, it's not even just the glad tidings that this woman that I'm about to show you is going to be your wife in this dunya. This is your wife in this life and in the next life. And he would show the Prophet ﷺ an image within that cloth that إِذَا أَنْتِ فِيهِ. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling Aisha radiallahu anha this way after he got married, right? Saying that it would be your image. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَقُولْ إِنَّكُ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ يُمْضِهِ.